Hello, and welcome to the candidate interviews for the 2015 municipal election. This is brought to you by Citizens for Environmental Balance and taped here in Newburyport's community studio, PortMedia, located on Graff Road. Citizens for Environmental Balance, or CEB, is a grassroots volunteer citizens group dedicated to ensuring that the people's voice is heard during public debate regarding the important issues that will have a long-term impact on the quality of our community's environment and our children's future. One of our mission goals is to present factual information so that informed decisions can be made regarding the future of the community. Citizens for Environmental Balance has, for a number of local elections, run candidate interviews. This is a series of one-on-one interviews with candidates for the City Council positions. All candidates have been invited to participate to air their stance on issues and to present themselves to us, the citizens of Newburyport. Each candidate has been given a list of questions 48 hours in advance of his or her interviews in order to prepare. Each candidate shall be asked the same questions. Follow-up questions will be asked as needed, and these will vary. I'm Dennis Chambers. I'm a resident of Federal Street and a registered voter here in the city, and I have essentially formulated these 10 questions. Each candidate's interview will air on the local access channels throughout the remainder of the season. In addition, the interviews will be posted on the internet for those without cable. May the voters be informed. Hello, I'm Dennis Chambers on behalf of Citizens for Environmental Balance. We are here today with Sheila Mullins, who is running for Newburyport City Council at large. Sheila, welcome.
Hi, Will.
To our table, and
thank you.
Nice to have you here.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, if you will, please.
I'm a 28-year resident of the city of Newburyport. When my husband and I moved here, I knew that this was as far as we had planned on going, so Newburyport is my adopted home. One of the main reasons why I'm running is a lot of the issues that are affecting residents. I'm a resident. They're affecting me just as much as they are everybody else. My background is that by profession, I'm an interior designer, personal cook, and right now I am functioning at my job as a business manager for the company that I work for. I've been involved for a long time in Newburyport as a volunteer in various capacities and have been very involved civically. I'm one of the founders of the Merrimack River Feline Rescue Society, an organization very near and dear to my heart. Please come to the Fur Ball. I'm going to get a plug in for the Feline Rescue Society. And I worked for many years with Citizens for Environmental Balance when Al DC was the chair of CEB. I have been involved politically in terms of working on various campaigns here in Newburyport. I've spent hours of time at various city meetings so that I can really learn to what's going on in the city, but also I think it's important as a citizen to be involved with your local government.
Good. Let's jump right into one of the big issues confronting lots of people in town, and that is the invasion's the wrong word, but the the advent of New England development and,
yes.
and Mr. Karp et al. Right? They are coming with lots of money. They own lots of property in town. What is your take on NED?
Well, I think part of it is that we have nothing to work with right now. There are no plans. There's been nothing disclosed, just some talk about it potentially occurring. This can't be a shell game. This has to be full disclosure. It has to be an open process. The public has to be able to respond. The place where this is really going to occur is in the planning board. Now, the Waterfront West Overlay District has a lot of things that are for the benefit of our community, for the benefit of our citizens, and just simply have a lot of public benefit. Those are the things that I would be looking more as a resident to make sure that those things aren't traded off, because realistically the City Council is not, unless there is literally a zoning change, the City Council doesn't really have any purview in this particular process. But it is something that every one of us should be involved with and keeping our eyes on.
Do you think taxpayers need some kind of relief here in town? I've heard people say they're being taxed too much. I've heard others say taxing is just right, or maybe we need to be taxed more. It's a kind of a Goldilocks kind of issue. You know, do you think we're being taxed just right? What's your take on the taxation in Newburyport?
I'm going to basically say what I've heard as I've gone knocking doors. People are stressed at the tax level and the fees and everything else that's going on in the city. What people want to have happen at this point is they want the projects to slow down. We don't seem to have the ability at this point to cost things correctly. Things are coming in over budget. We have poor oversight, projects are getting behind, and the city seems to have no idea at this point how to cost manage or oversee a project without there being problems. And two examples would be the Plum Island situation and the water treatment plant. If these were private sector projects, people would be fired. This does not happen in the public sector, so there really is, in some respects, no accountability on that. We have a constant influx of new fees, and right now there is a commission that's been established to study our fee structure. And the constant influx of fees is an extraordinary imposition on taxpayers, especially when it comes in line with what's going on in the schools. The school lunch program at this point is hemorrhaging money. The school committee is not addressing it, and we just keep throwing money at it. We continue to add employees in more administrative areas, but not in the Department of Public Services, who really is responsible for infrastructure maintenance. The number of people working at the DPS keeps shrinking. What we are paying for right now, over and above our tax rate, are the Knock, Mullen, and Bresnahan schools, the water purification plant, the sewer treatment plant with more money yet to come, the senior center, and those are just a few to mention. What's not yet on taxpayers' bill is the new DPS addition, the new high school field, the new elementary field, Plum Island, and the whole situation with Plum Island that we have no clue what that's going to cost. And it will cost us here a lot of money. People are struggling. When I talk to people, many people are underemployed, many people are unemployed. They are having, at this point, a very difficult time being able to pay the fees and the taxes for the city, to pay their mortgage, to pay for their families, and other necessities. Yeah, here in Newburyport, we have this problem going on. I can't tell you how many empty houses I have seen, people unable in more modest areas to be able to maintain their homes. And it's not just those on fixed income, although they too are vulnerable to the constant increases. We need to prioritize what we're doing. We need to slow the process down. We cannot fix 10, 20, 50, 100 years worth of infrastructure lack of maintenance in a matter of 10 years and hope to have an affordable rate for people to live here. We just can't.
So there's quite a balance between people's being able to afford their own homes and being able to pay the taxes, pay the fees. A lot of people are finding that very difficult to do.
Yes.
All right. Let's talk about the Newburyport City budget while we're here, if we may. As you know, the mayor is the one who sends the budget to the council, and the council has very little impact on that. But they do have a bit. What is your thinking on the mayor's budget?
To an extent, I kind of reject that notion. The city council actually controls the city's pocketbook. Nothing gets spent without the city council's approval on that. So yes, the mayor produces the budget. The city council can only cut line items. But I will tell you, this year, when the city council saw something that needed to be increased, this was school funding. It happened, and it can happen. But along those lines, we should actually consider exploring a zero-based budgeting and put an assessment on every single item from paper clips to vehicles versus just automatic increases in our budget. I spent a lot of time this year at the budget hearings, as many as I could get to, and I noticed that it seemed to me that the city council struggled a bit with the coding systems, which made it difficult for the city council to comprehend the budget, let alone a member of the public. The budget really should be absolutely crystal clear. So anybody can understand it, not just those who work in government. One of the other things that distresses me is that, to me, the reality is that anyone who is elected, in my opinion, especially the city council, is to be a lobbyist for the taxpayer. What really bugs me at budget time is that the only people really not allowed at the table are the people who are paying for it. That's the taxpayers. Government is supposed to be, by the way our government was structured, of the people, by the people, and for the people. Frankly, it's one of the reasons why I'm running for city council.
And many other possibilities to come. I should think there must be many areas where those kinds of ideas can be applied to our city budget.
I think it's the city council's duty, and I'm not saying that the current city council has not done a good job, but the city council's duty is to look at and scrutinize every single penny for the benefit of the taxpayers.
What do you think about education? Do the parents and other residents of Newburyport have a sense of relaxation about the education going well? Are we educating our students well? Education seems to be a really important figure as to people moving in or why they move out. So what's your take on our education situation?
Well, by and large, I mean, you can't blame a parent. I mean, every parent wants the best thing for their child, and I think nobody can fault a parent for wanting the best for their children. So every parent wants the best education they can possibly have for their children. And yes, as a city council candidate, the topic of schools comes up over and over and over again, and that's not a bad thing. It means parents are concerned, as they should be.
For parents and indeed all citizens of Newburyport, or of any town, any municipality, the level and the quality of education that the children receive is quite important. What's your take on the quality of education in Newburyport?
Newburyport is not unlike any other community. Every parent wants the best for their children. They want the best education for their children. I can't imagine any parent not wanting the best education for their child. In terms of, I can't speak from personal experience because I don't have children in the Newburyport public schools, but as a city council candidate, the one thing that comes up over and over and over again is our schools. Now, the reality of where the city council has purview and where the city council doesn't have purview is the city council can only either give a thumbs up or a thumbs down to the school committee's budget. Everything pertaining to budgets, how the money is spent, and anything in regards to the schools by state law is under the purview of the school committee.
Who themselves are elected.
Who are elected and will be on the ballot this November. The part that needs to some extent be understood is if the city council, say, gets a request from the school committee for $5 billion for paper clips, the city council might find that number a little crazy, and they can't take that line item and say cut down to $500 for paper clips for the year, just from $5 billion. The only thing they can do is they can say to the school committee, well, we as a city council think $5 billion for paper clips is a little crazy, and we're going to cut $5 billion from the school budget. At that point, it is up to the school committee where that money actually is cut. It doesn't have to come out of the paperclip budget. I think that the reality of education is our school's education is good, but can it be better? It can always be better. And I think that anything that we can do to raise our standards, to push our children to excel and to be the best that they can possibly be, because those kids are going to have to be prepared for a world that, frankly, neither one of us are going to have a clue how to enter in at 20, 23 years old, when these kids that are just entering school are going to be entering the workforce. We need to prepare them for a world that we just can't even imagine at this point.
Isn't it true that the school budget takes the lion's share of the entire city budget?
If you add everything in the health care, the retirement, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 55–60% of the city's budget. So yes, it does. It takes up a lion's share of the city's budget.
Wow. Let's move into maybe a less palatable subject, but nonetheless important to everyone, and that is water and sewer treatments. People have been complaining a lot, particularly about the odor in the treatment plant. Do you have any thinking on those ideas?
As long as I've lived here, which is now 28 years, there has been a smell coming from the sewer treatment plant. It's nothing new. And I live in Ward 2, near the sewer treatment plant. So frankly, this affects me just as much as it affects everybody else. In my opinion, the sewer treatment plant should have been moved to a different location, but it is where it is. But no additional capacity was added. And according to the mayor, the reason why we did this whole upgrade was to satisfy EPA regulations, but nothing was done to bring it in compliance with our quality of life. And that's an important issue. This was supposed to cost somewhere in the neighborhood of $27-ish million. It's now upwards of around $34 million, and to deal with the smell, allegedly another $3.4 million. As much as I'm reticent to say spend money, we do need to fix the problem once and for all and finally get it fixed. And once we fix it, it needs to be properly maintained. It really is as simple as that, in my opinion.
Gotcha. There's a term that I've become familiar with having done several of these interviews, and that is free cash.
Yes.
In my world, cash is never free, but evidently in the world of government, there is free cash floating around, and I wonder if you have any thoughts on that.
To me right now, from when I've sat in on a lot of city council meetings, it seems to almost be used as a second budget or an offline budget or a slush fund. I'm not sure what to call it, for items that in some respects really should be going through the regular budgetary process. And I'll give you an example of a budget transfer that I saw happen. Heating, electricity, for the Brown School for Youth Services. I have no problems with having heating and cooling and electricity spent for youth services, but that should actually become part of our city's regular budget, not pulled out of free cash. The free cash fund is a fund that is over and above our roughly 5% of our budget rainy day fund. That's if everything goes kaflooey and the world, the whole bottom goes out.
Like we kind of had with the snow last winter. That was a pretty close to it.
That was a pretty kaflooey situation, yes. Right. The money could actually be used for capital improvement projects such as sidewalks or other infrastructure projects such as a new boiler for City Hall or for fixing the fire station out on Story Avenue or some other such thing. But in my opinion, if it's money that's over and above, it really should go back to the residents who've paid too much.
Sheila, you mentioned a minute ago the idea of sidewalks. Sidewalks impact everyone in town, mothers walking their babies in baby carriages, older folks trying to get around, everybody, runners. What can be done about sidewalks through the City Council, do you believe?
The reality is there have been some numbers that have been floated around. Pick a number between 26 million and 50 million to do all the sidewalks. I don't really think there's an appetite for us to do a debt exclusion to redo all of the sidewalks and impact everybody's taxes all at once to do that. But when the sidewalks are addressed in any area, the tree issue has to be addressed. One of the main problems we have in our city is that inappropriate tree species were planted a long time ago, and we see it all over the city. You see tree roots that are just bubbling up everywhere, and that's really the biggest problem that we have with our sidewalks are inappropriate tree species, so that has to be addressed. To some extent, we're making some headway We originally were spending about $30,000 a year. We're spending right now with the meals tax money, we're spending roughly $330,000 or so a year on sidewalks. But one of the bigger problems is 2 years ago, I have the numbers from 2 years ago, if you were putting in new concrete sidewalks and granite curbing, the cost was $135 a linear foot. You find out at $135 a linear foot, that $30,000 basically goes from, from me to the others to the wall on the other side, and $330,000 still doesn't go all that far. So there are some things that we can do to deal with that. I mean, I have a proposal that I am in the process of trying to vet with the state, which is to incentivize people who would like to do their own sidewalks. So let me give you an example. You decide in front of your house you want to do your sidewalk.
In fact, we did.
Okay. So because you are paying for the city's property to be maintained, I think in my proposal that you should receive a property tax break. Now there'd be a maximum cap per year for the total number of dollars, a maximum amount any person could deduct. But to me, if we can get you, for example, to pay for your sidewalk, maybe somebody else who can't afford to pay for their sidewalk or chooses not to do that, we can do other areas to be done that need to be done and thereby get a little bit more of the sidewalks done. It's not a perfect program. There's nothing that we're going to do in the short run short of literally taking a huge amount of money and putting it into all of our sidewalks, and I just don't see the appetite, like I said, for doing that.
And there's no painless answer to sidewalk
There's
repair.
no painless answer other than the city's working on it, doing the best job we can do, just trying to come up with some different ways to accomplish it. But everybody, including myself, needs to be patient. We're getting there, just not fast enough.
We talked earlier about the New England Development Corporation coming into town. Part of what that means to the city, I believe, is the garage that's going up on Titcomb Street. Do you have thoughts on that garage?
Well, I have more questions right now than I actually have thoughts on the garage. There were a lot of questions that have been asked about the garage and answers that have not been forthcoming at this point. Residents and city councilors and others that might be impacted by it need to have certain questions answered. The details right now are unknown. For example, the total number of spaces. There are numbers that are floating around on all of this, but there's nothing that says there's going to be one parking space. It's going to be managed by this particular group. So let's start asking some questions and get some questions answered. What are the total number of parking spaces we're talking about? Why was not eminent domain explored as an option for taking the land? How many spaces are there definitely going to be spaces that are going to be reserved for New England development? And if so, exactly how many? Who's going to own the garage? Who's actually going to manage it?
Who maintains it?
Who's going to maintain it? What time are the buses going to be running? How about the traffic concerns for the residents? We need to know these questions. Will resident parking stickers be valid? Is this going to be a 24/7, 365 operation? How about who gets the parking revenues? I have a lot of questions right now. I don't have any answers because there's just not enough information. So until those questions are answered, I really can't speak a whole lot to the garage.
I understand. Let's move into some a bit more a pleasant topic, and that is the Central Waterfront.
Yes.
Every human being in Newburyport cares deeply about the Central Waterfront, and I'm wondering if you...
And you're darn right about that. Yeah. Newburyport residents love their waterfront,
they do.
And they value it from Ward 1 to Ward 6. In terms of the waterfront, right now the NRA is the owner of the waterfront.
The Newburyport Redevelopment Authority.
Correct. There has been some discussion of late as to doing away with the NRA. But the reality is the only people that can actually do away with the NRA is the NRA. They have to vote themselves out of business. and at that point there's still a several-year process for them to get everything done that they would need to get done. That said, there is a working group that has been recently appointed by the City Council President Tom O'Brien, pretty much with all the stakeholders together at the table, and that group's work should be done by the end of this year. I actually would like to see what the result of that work is. So I don't know what those discussions are. They've had one meeting and there's another meeting coming up. I believe it's this Tuesday. Right now, the NRA's makeup, they have a landscape architect, an architect, and somebody who is very pro-open waterfront. This might actually be the group that has the skill set built in to design the park. I'm not necessarily willing to throw the NRA out at this moment. I want to take a wait-and-see approach to, as I said, what happens with this particular group before I make any real judgment at that point. But if the NRA goes away and chooses to give the property to the city, I'm not saying that it's a probability. I'm saying it's within the realm of possibility that the city could sell the land off as surplus. But right now, the question that everybody wants to know the answer to is, we want a park, and the question is, how do we pay for it? Well, I have a proposal that keeps that from becoming a burden to the taxpayers, and that is to take the revenue for the parking and put that against a revenue bond. This has been vetted with the state, and this is perfectly fine with them to do that. So what we do is we take that money from the parking, pay off as much of that revenue bond as we can, as quickly as we can. And as parking starts to come off the waterfront, obviously the amount of revenue would decrease, and let's say we were paying $10 a year for the revenue bond, that might go down to $8 a year, then $6 a year, and slowly fade off. But most of that bond would be paid off, so that does not become a burden to the residents of Newburyport. So that's my suggestion on how we might want to consider paying for it.
Let's wrap up our discussion together with one of the more interesting philosophical questions, in my view, about the city of Newburyport, and that is historic preservation.
Yes.
Newburyport is a gem of a city. No one disagrees with that. It's one of the great colonial cities. It was considered to be the capital of Massachusetts as a possibility for a long time, with the center of clipper shipbuilding. Our history is magnificent here, as are many of the homes on High Street and other places. What do you think are the key issues regarding historic preservation?
Well, the history of America is the history of Newburyport. They are inextricably linked. But in terms of historic preservation, when people think about the quintessential New England seacoast town, the place that they're thinking of is Newburyport. And there really is no other place like Newburyport outside of Newburyport. It's what makes us unique is the way we look, but not just the way we look, the way we feel. You cannot today build zoning-wise the scale of buildings that we had at that time. One of our main economic engines for the city is cultural tourism, and that's because of the way we look. We want to preserve our economic engines. We don't want to destroy the goose that laid the golden egg. By tearing our historic buildings down and replacing them with Disneyfied versions of what history might have been, we're destroying our own future for short-term economic gain. To me, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. We put some controls in. One was the downtown overlay district, and that particular section of the zoning, I'm just going to read it straight out of there, was intended to encourage the implementation of the recommendations of the city's 1991 Historic Preservation Plan, the 2001 Master Plan, and the 2003 Waterfront Strategic Plan. Most of Newburyport is now within the National Register. You can go around the city and you will see some bronze plaques that delineate the boundaries of the National Historic Register of Historic Places. There's no protections that come with that whatsoever. But it's a federal designation, and what that designation is, hey folks, look at what you have here because it's really special and you should consider protecting what you have. And that's not just for a local, that's a federal designation. The federal government thinks Newburyport is as unique and wonderful as we who live here and love Newburyport think it is.
If you'd like to have the last word in our conversation, you certainly may. Whatever you'd like to talk about. What's your thinking about the near future for the town, and how would you like to participate in making that future happen?
In terms of how I'd like to participate, in the short run, I'm simply going to ask you for one of your 5 votes for City Council at large. There's nothing more I can ask than that at this particular point. No matter what happens, I will continue to be involved in the community that I have made my adopted hometown because I love Newburyport. It is my adopted hometown. I came from a community where that was very similar in many ways to what people who were born and raised here understood as a Newburyport community. Everybody knew everybody. You went to school with the kids of the kids that your parents went to school with in the same school that your parents went to. When I moved here, I understood that that's what people who were lamenting when people like me moved here. I came from that town. I grew up in the house my mother grew up in that my brother is now raising his family, and I went to school with the kids of the kids my mother went to school with. I understand that. It's part of the reason why I treasure and love this community and why I work very hard to defend and protect this community, because I treasure it because it is my adopted hometown, but also because of its significance in history. And if we forget our own history, we don't know where we're going and we're doomed to repeat. We can't repeat the mistakes we've made. We need to learn from them and move forward and make a better life and a better community for ourselves.
Sheila Mullins is running for City Council at large. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your candidacy.
Thank you.